It nestles quietly between the inland fringe of Snowdonia and the Irish Sea. The roof's more or less at sea level, behind the shingle that has always held back the ocean. This is Fairbourne. To the north, the majestic and deceptively gentle Moddach estuary borders the village.
If the village is abandoned to the sea, then there goes my livelihood.
I mean, people are obviously going to ask questions. Where am I going to live? Who's going to fund it? You know, when is this going to happen? What's going to trigger it to happen?
They produced a shoreline management plan without any engagement and involvement with the people whose lives were going to be affected.
People in Fairbourne, many of them English retirees, nonplussed by the council's decision to demolish and clear the entire place because it's too costly to defend against rising seawater. In council jargon, Fairbourne will be decommissioned.
It cost them a lot to decommission the place, wouldn't it? Surely.
Oh, millions of pounds. Yeah. Well, that money could be spent wisely to defend the village for longer.
Yes, yeah.
Stuart Eaves chairs Fairbourne's Community Council.
The village hasn't flooded in any way or form of what you'd call flooding since the 1940s. None of the scientists can agree on how much the sea is rising and how much it's going to rise. We've been told that by 2050 it's going to have risen by 1.5 metres. Well, you know, that's ludicrous.
Research predicts sea rise here ranging from 27 centimetres to well above a metre in the next 80 years. Gwynedd Council told us the village is uniquely vulnerable, below sea level 24 times a year, and that will increase. But they said destroying it is not considered likely for at least 30 years. What's enraged people here is the perceived lack of communication from the authorities.
As far as I'm aware, the decision was made probably even prior to 2014. It just came about that we inadvertently learnt about it through a television programme that focused on Fairbourne.
The council insists it's worked hard on liaison down the years, meeting villagers more than 300 times. Yet, 5 years on, yes, 5 years, people here not only fear their homes will be destroyed without compensation, but that they will even be forced to pay the cost of the demolition.
The council have made it quite clear that there is no compensation whatsoever. They want to make us pay for the flattening and removal of our houses. But of course, they have given no indication of where we're going to live.
Because those questions...
Sylvia Stevenson, equally baffled by how all this has been handled, and she had a career in local government.
It means that what I invested in property could not then be inheritance for my grandchildren. And that's quite soul-destroying.
People certainly believe they could be given a bill for having their house destroyed.
Well, that is absolutely disgusting, that they think they can get us out and then give us a bill for demolishing our properties. I really don't think that will go ahead. I think if they give it some thought, they will have to think again.
This afternoon, the council said it won't charge people for having their homes wrecked, but couldn't say whether another authority might do so. It said nothing like this has ever been attempted in the UK. It still doesn't have a final plan and admitted it lacks the power and money on its own to deliver one. Which is why many, like Sylvia Stevenson, believe that as our seas rise, the UK lacks strategic planning. This stuff is way beyond local councils.
The governments have got to start to get together and look at climate adaptation, because funding is made available for defences, but where's the funding if you have to retreat? Where's the funding if you're manage realignment? Where's the funding if you're decommissioned? Nobody can tell me what's going to happen there.
Put bluntly, a council decided to obliterate a village without knowing how to do it.
If people here are going to become the UK's first climate refugees, they'll probably not be the last. So this is an important test case. And yet, 5 years into this process, nobody knows what compensation package, if any, they'll get for losing their homes. Nobody knows if they're going to face a bill when the authorities destroy those homes. Nobody knows what sea event will trigger this whole process to begin. If the UK is going to look after and care for our coastal communities as our sea levels rise, as they assuredly will, we have got to do better than this. Well, this whole morass underlined really today when Gwynedd Council sent us a statement saying, look, this is uncharted territory. There is no established flow for funds in this situation. We've never been here before. There's no legal framework. We're doing what we can to push this forward and work with the Welsh Government. But many would observe it's way beyond that. We need a national UK-wide strategy for retreating people from these areas, and it doesn't, frankly, yet exist. We're now just a few miles up the coast as those demonstrations have been rolling on around the globe. They were, of course, happening here. Let's have a look at some pictures here of students, 12-year-old students who took themselves out of class today. And, of course, these protests in this region are given an added poignancy because of the immediacy of what is happening in this village. Everyone around here knows about the situation in Fairbourne. This is what these 12-year-old students had to say to us.
It just shows that climate change really is a thing, because there's the deniers, and now surely now they've heard that they'll have to be evacuated soon. It's just hit home.
This is a seaside town as well, and well, it's quite close, so it's possible that that could happen too, which is quite frightful. So I think we definitely do need to make some big changes at the moment to prevent that from happening.
Those children, people around the world today sending an unambiguous message to the UN for its critical climate conference next week. They don't want any more speeches, as the UN Secretary General himself said. No more fancy words than us. There's enough hot air up there, let's face it. The time has come for action. Let's see next week in New York if we get any.
Alex, thanks so much. What a stunning backdrop. Well, earlier I spoke to the Green MP, Caroline Lucas, and Robert Colville, the director of the Centre for Policy Studies, about today's protests. And I began by asking Robert Colville why he was critical of the demands of the climate protesters.
The Climate Strike website leads you to a thing called the People's Demands, which is produced by this sort of umbrella group of left-wing sort of campaigning organisations from around the world. And what the demands are essentially is that we need to do all the things you'd expect. We need to sort of decarbonise within 10 years. We need to sort of massively focus on climate change, but we also need to do this in kind of ways which don't involve any sort of free market solutions, any technological solutions, any modern agriculture. We need to sort of,
I guess they would say the end justifies the means. So
it's basically saying capitalism has caused this mess. The way to fix it is to reject capitalism.
And you don't like the idea of that? You think capitalism has a solution to this problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think more to the point, I think that if you tell people that the only way we can fix the planet is by making them poorer, then they're not going to want to fix the planet.
Today, raises awareness massively.
Yeah.
But are people serious about the kind of actions that are required to make this become a reality?
I think they're deadly serious about it, and it's just as well we all are, because if we're serious and listen to what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says, then we need to get to halving global climate emissions in the next 11 years. Now, that is an ambitious programme, but the good news is that there are ways of doing it. For example, a massive investment in public transport that is good for people as well. So this is not an agenda of telling people what they can't do.
But the kind of sacrifices being called for, I mean, they're in the DNA of your party. You're the Green MP. But, if you're from the Labour Party or the Tory Party or the Lib Dems or the SNP, you're asking people to make sacrifices. That probably means they're not going to get re-elected. Can any politician do that?
I want to challenge your framing of this being about sacrifice. If we shift to a greener, fairer economy, then we've got more public transport, we've got local, affordable food, we've got homes being properly insulated so people don't die in the 21st century from fuel poverty. This is an agenda that has a positive outcome.
But it also has some sacrifices, doesn't it? Less meat, less air travel.
If people want to fly,
less cars, fewer cars.
regularly. If people want to fly every month, then yes, certainly they're not going to be doing that anymore. But something like a frequent flyer levy recognises the fact that 70% of the flights are taken by 15% of the people. So those 15% of the people who are flying a lot will have to fly less. But I don't think that is a massive sacrifice compared to the challenge of dealing with climate change.
Robert Colville.
The problem is we need to work with the grain of human nature. And the minute you start telling people that they can't have things, I think that's where the problem starts. I mean, Caroline is sort of denying this, but there is a strain of the green movement which is essentially saying, not just to people in a developed world, And I think it's really kind of horrible to say to people in a developing world, you can't have the level of prosperity we have.
Exactly
You
not
can't
what
have.
we're saying. That is so much not what we are saying. We are precisely saying that those of us in the richer countries have to be able to reduce our emissions far more than this government is even thinking of. Let me just finish my point. This means that we need to reduce our emissions far more than this government is even thinking about, precisely so that people in the poorer countries are able to develop. This is absolutely about social justice and equity.
And the single best way to mitigate the impact of climate change on a given country is to increase its GDP. It's having wealth is one of the key aspects,
Depends
which
who
enables
has
you to
wealth, doesn't it? And if your model of wealth trickling down has been shown not to work, I want people to be able to genuinely take part in the prosperity of their country. But the idea that simply chasing GDP growth is the way that's going to do it has been shown patently to be wrong.
So China is, will soon overtake America as the world's richest economy. You've got something like 600, 700 million people in the middle class. They want to drive cars, they want to use air conditioning, they want to eat pork for, breakfast, lunch and dinner. How do you persuade them not to do so?
Well, China's such an interesting example because they are going leaps and bounds when it comes to renewable energy, not just from an environmental reason, but because of air pollution and so forth. So they are actually in the lead when it comes to providing renewable technologies.
But they burn a lot of coal, an awful lot of coal.
And they are shifting very, very quickly now to not burning coal, not least because their people are choking in the streets and the public pressure for that is changing. And, if we can drive economies through fueling them differently, but we can also redesign economies so that they are not based on chasing growth, which doesn't help the people at the bottom. It helps the richest get more rich, but it doesn't help people at the bottom.
But for that I say, obviously China is a rather different political system for us, and it's rather easier for the Chinese government to achieve to cascade down change than it is in countries like ours. But what I find really interesting is that we started out talking about how you cut emissions, and seamlessly and inevitably we've moved towards basically issues of wealth distribution, issues of issues of system change, not climate change, to use a slogan. It's explicitly about ending capitalism and rejecting the market.
Okay, we've run out of time. Got to leave it there. Robert Colville, Karen Lucas, thanks very much.